Liverpool defend their title against the Turin side Juventus, who, again, Juve fans fucking hate Roma fans domestically, but it just doesn't matter, right? Because there's this fucking second shadow match within the match that is Italian ultras versus English casuals.
Meanwhile, the Liverpool team has discovered this sort of Balmer peak where they they have incredible soccer skill after a certain number of drinks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is the thing. This is going to be the most hotly disputed part of this. So yell at me in the comments, right? But it remains from that day to this very hotly disputed to what extent non-Liverpool football hooligans were in attendance on the Liverpool side at Heysel at the 85 European Cup final. I've seen interviews with firms from other clubs who were explicitly invited. I think also some probably came on their own because they knew there would be fighting and that appealed to them.
Right. It makes sense they'd show up.
It and it proves a point. Also, it's sort of revenge, but also some of this, but also some of this is just organic from Liverpool supporters. And I think some of this narrative of outside agitators, of like National Front guys, of other firms is sort of exculpatory, and it's like self-exculpatory on Liverpool's part. To be like, yeah, no, it actually wasn't us. It was, it was these other guys. So, relitigate that in the comments.
Don't relitigate shit in the comments. Shut up.
But so in '84, the problem was that they held the cup final at one of the two sides' home cities instead of at a neutral location, and that led to the violence in Rome. So, okay, you got to have a neutral location. What's more neutral than Belgium?
Switzerland.
This reminds me of a quote from that great history book, 1066 and all that. The Great War was a war between Germany and America and was thus fought in Belgium.
I mean, there are serious questions about why UEFA holds this in Belgium. Like, there are bigger, more professional stadiums that could have accommodated this game. Why they picked Heysel Stadium is a question that people are still asking today. Given that it's UEFA, it's probably to do with bribes.
Yeah, it's soccer, so it's bribes.
Yeah, there was probably some profiteering on the side, but by this point, who can say? Next slide, please. And we see our Honkball Stadion here.
This thing looks like shit.
Yeah,
it's Belgian.
Yeah.
This is Heysel. It was built in the 1920s, which means at this point it is 55 years old.
It looks like it's been modernized to be worse.
Yep. It's I think it used to have a front building that they would that they demolished, but at this point it's literally falling apart, like in a masonry sense.
Like we're talking like 80s Fenway.
Yeah, absolutely. UEFA does
Old Boston Garden, baby.
UEFA does a pre-match safety inspection, and that we don't know what that consisted of. We do know that it lasted 30 minutes, start to finish. So a guy looked at this,
taking some bribes, and smoking a cigarette.
A guy looked at this and then looked at some envelopes and then looked at this again and decided it was fine.
I was about to say, I have done structural inspections, wide-ranging inspections of building, and I would say in 30 minutes I could do like one small pizza slice of this building here.
Neither Juventus nor Liverpool wants to play here. This is a classic of our genre. This is one of those disasters where there's this long lead-in where everybody looks at it and goes, "Oh, that's going to be bad. We shouldn't do that."
Yeah.
I want to talk about how bad the masonry is. When fans get there without tickets, which is still a thing you could do, there's a decent chance you'll get in. Some of them are literally able to get in by kicking holes in the wall.
That's pretty cool.
When you do get in, it's all standing, and you're standing on a concrete terrace which has the rebar exposed and big chunks of concrete just lying loose on the floor.
Where's Sean from Antifada? Get in there, bud.
I used to have a bad habit of just picking loose bricks out of buildings anytime I was
still
walking
do
around.
that?
Yeah, actually, I do still do that.
Yeah, and you could have come away with a cement mixer full of
You would
loose
have had
cement.
half the stadium by the time you were
I
done.
have half the stadium like in my pocket. Like
Also, beneath a little hut at the back of the North Terrace, there were dozens of meter-long lengths of rigid plastic pipe, just easily accessible, just for anyone who was poking around. And most importantly, different sections are separated by thin chain link fences, which will become important as I show you. Next slide, please. The most horrifying diagram I've seen on this podcast in a minute.
Oh, I don't like that.
So, would you believe that both teams were opposed to this seating arrangement?
that would make sense.
So, this idea of separating fans by which club they support is something that, like, Italian football, very keen on. English football, very keen on. Totally unknown in Belgium. In Belgium, you just go to the football, you have a nice time.
Right.
You don't even worry about it. You have a waffle or whatever. And so the Belgian authorities don't really get the idea of separating fans. The original idea is you put the Liverpool fans at one end, you put the Juventus fans at the other end, you fill in the space with neutrals, and then, that way no one can fight each other. But
correct me if I'm wrong.
End of episode. Have a good one, everybody.
So these guys at the end, this is all standing area, and then like in the middle, these are seats, right?
I think this might actually be all standing.
Oh,
I think it might be all terraced.
Wow.
But the problem is, because Liverpool are playing slightly further away, there's not as many Liverpool fans as there are Juventus fans. And they don't want to just have an empty section. So section Z here is neutral. Just anyone can turn up and get a ticket. And there are a decent number of Italian expats and people of Italian descent who live in Belgium, who get to see a really, really good Italian football side play a really good English side for not very much money and for like very little traveling time. So a bunch of them do. A bunch of Italian Juventus supporters in Belgium just show up and end up in section Z next to...
Were they like told, they're like, hey, you're going to be next to the Liverpool supporters?
Fuck no, of course not.
No,
no one was told anything.
Oh my God.
So about that fence, next slide, please. So
boy.
So the Liverpool fans have been drinking heavily.
Hats.
Oh yeah,
that's
the bucket hats.
That's not chain link. Chain link's made of metal. That looks like it's some kind of like stamped plastic.
Not even
shit.
sugar wire.
I've heard it described as tennis netting. So the Liverpool fans have been drinking all day, by and large, and then they go to the match. And about an hour before the match starts, the fighting does. Foolish to talk about provocation or who started it, but very quickly you see like stones, loose bits of concrete, bottles, coins, empty cans thrown over this fence between section X and section Z. And we're looking here at section Z, the mixed section, and you can see the sort of like mix of supporters. You can see a Liverpool flag. You can see some Juventus hats. There's one guy, if you see the red Kango about halfway up on the far right, wearing a Roma hat. So you have a real mix in there. And you may also notice, if you count them up, 5 Belgian cops in riot gear, plus the guy in the hat. For a long time, these were the only cops on this fence, on this boundary. There had been another 8 stationed up there, But they were outside the ground investigating a theft of 600 francs, or about 22 euros, from a cash box at a hot dog stand. I'm not sure why this needed 8 cops in riot gear to solve this sort of crime of the century, but that's where they went.
They knew it was coming, and they didn't want to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as you approach kickoff, fans from the Liverpool section X, mount this assault on Section Z. They overwhelm the cops. They tear down this fence. We're talking about maybe 200 people, which is a lot within the context of how many people would you like to fight at once.
Right.
Next slide, please. And this starts another crowd control event.
Yes.
If you are not interested in fighting a shitload of drunk Englishmen, you have to leave the situation. You have to do the share zone thing. You have to hit the bricks,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You might not even get a choice. You might just be getting forced back by the crowd anyway. But in that case, you're getting forced back towards the walls of the stadium. There's 2 walls. There's the outer wall, and then there's the wall that, if you go back to the diagram,
Right.
it's the wall between Section Z and the long sort of like that one. Yes. So those 2 walls, which are like tall concrete walls, the shitty crumbling concrete walls, which are now having an entire section of fans pushing against them. So some people die of crush injuries at this point, and then the fucking wall collapses.
Oh, fuck.
And again, like crowd movements, right? This isn't anyone's fault aside from the English people, but like what happens is that the wall collapses on top of people, and then the crowd goes over the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who are like trapped under the wall who have people climb over them.
Jesus.
If you look at the concrete wall here, you can see the stanchions on it.
Yeah, you should.
Those are, yeah.
Your buttresses here are clearly not designed to withstand a force from this side. I mean, overall, I imagine a stadium of this sort of this age was not built with the idea of hooliganism in mind.
No,
honestly, like having it give
it's built
way.
for the finest sports of the 1920s, which are hitting each other with clubs or whatever.
Yeah. Although, if it didn't give way, you might have had more crash deaths than concrete wall falling on people deaths.
Yeah. Yeah. But the stanchions on this are supposedly built like on the wrong side.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is where most of your deaths happen. People die from being pushed against the wall. People die from being crushed by the wall. And the fighting is still happening. So you're not fucking doing first aid, right? The police radios don't work. So they can't call reinforcements. There is 1 doctor and something like 150 Red Cross volunteers who are also immediately overwhelmed. And so 39 people die, something like 400 injured. The youngest is like 11 years old.
Jesus.
There's this I found this line from an Italian fan who's a doctor, actually, who says, I saw my son lying on the terrace and I put my ear to his chest and listened. I thought I could hear a pulse, but I realized it was my own heart. He was dead and a television crew was filming me, and later I saw footage of myself finding my dead son, because all of this went out live.
Right.
And, accidentally traumatizing an entire generation of people watching it, not to mention the commentators. The Juventus fans who are at the other end of the stadium can see what's happening. They riot themselves, break out of their stand, try and run down the pitch. Probably for better rather than for worse, the police are able to like stop them.
Oh yeah, that probably would have made it a lot worse.
Right.
Yes. But speaking of making it a lot worse, next slide, please. What they do after this is they play the fucking football match.
Why? Don't do that.
Of course.
Because the Belgian cops are afraid that if they don't, the violence will be worse.
Sure.
Which
Okay.
I'm not sure. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
I think the fear is that if you just tell everybody to go home, then you have like a running battle in the streets rather than just contained within the stadium. But all the players know what's happened, and Juventus in particular explicitly request not to play the match, but UEFA ignore them. Incidentally, one of the Liverpool players, he dislocates his shoulder like a couple of minutes in. They have to get him to the hospital in secret, lock his hospital room with an armed guard, and cover up his uniform when he's leaving the hospital. Because that it's like the fucking nearest hospital. That's where a shit ton of victims of the collapse and the crush injuries are. Juve win the match in a sort of obviously fixed way. It doesn't matter. The Liverpool players get on their bus with a police escort. It drives them directly from their hotel to the plane, like onto the tarmac, so they don't have to go through the terminal. It's very much like, leave town sort of thing.
Get out of here.
Just
get out. Just get out of here.
Yeah. I have this quote from an Italian fan. He says, the match passed us by as though we were in a trance or as if we had been drugged. All of the players, like, who are all still alive, as far as I know, all still traumatized by it.
Understandable.
The captain of Liverpool this time, he says, he testified to the inquest about Hillsborough. Never any inquest for this. He's never been asked to speak about it to anyone. You just sort of deal with it. And so we're left with the aftermath. Next slide, please. And I guess we'll talk about the football aftermath first, and then the sort of aftermath in terms of hooliganism. So every investigation blames this entirely and solely on the Liverpool fans, which is fair enough, right? Within reason.
Mm-hmm.
If had they not gone over that barrier and attacked the other fans, none of this would have happened.
Yes,
it would have been unsafe and shitty, but you probably would have gotten away with it. And so 34 Liverpool fans get arrested, extradited for manslaughter. 14 of them get convicted. In all, I think only 7 of them go to prison, and it's for 3 years. The head of the Belgian Football Association gets a suspended sentence for fucking up the ticketing. So do a couple of Belgian cops, which I will say is more institutional consequences than happened for Hillsborough. South Yorkshire Police and the FA fought that for decades, rather than letting David Duckenfield or whoever get 1 year suspended sentence.
Yeah.
Which,
right.
Instead of even doing that, there was this sort of refusal to accept any kind of consequences. The Belgians don't do that. They sort of quarantine that. But there's this huge cultural shock in terms of European football and what people think it is. The French sporting newspaper L'Equipe, their headline is if this is football, then let it die. And there's this incredible sort of Guardian editorial in England that says, "Quarantine our sad, sick game. We are the root of the contagion, the home of the virus, and we must act accordingly."
Mm-hmm.
So
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So everyone expects Liverpool to get banned from competing in Europe, and I think no one would have been surprised by that. But enter into the breach one Margaret Thatcher, who attempts to finesse this a little bit.
I'm a finesse.
Yeah, and her way of finessing it is to ask the FA, why don't you just voluntarily pull every English club out of Europe for a couple of years, and hope that that's enough to make it go away.
Sure.
So the FA try this on UEFA, the European Football Association Union, and they go, all English sides out of Europe. That's an interesting idea. Why don't we just do that?
Yeah, Brits out.
Yes, truly, Brits out. Every English club is banned from playing in Europe indefinitely. And indefinitely turns out to be 5 years, 6 for Liverpool. But in sporting terms, this has this incredibly serious effect. In particular, Liverpool, who have just had won the European Cup the previous year, would otherwise have won it this year probably. Have this sort of incredible team are on incredible form that is then squandered entirely domestically over the next 6 years. If you want to, you can get really into the statistical consequences of this. But the main thing is that, if you are a young footballer and you want to play in Europe, you do not play in England. You go and play anywhere else. And so it's this draw of talent away from top flight English football in a way that wouldn't change until the advent of the Premier League.
I gotta say this image here, you can sort of see some of the forces that were involved in this incident, right?
Oh yeah, these
you can see these. You've got these. You got bars for people to sort of lean on, right? In these standing areas on these stadiums. This may be unfamiliar to some of our American viewers. The soccer stadiums, there's a lot of standing. You have bars you can.
Well, not now,
on.
but yes.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's you got safe standing now, which is like a whole different thing. The DC United Stadium has safe standing. Actually, that's the only time I've seen it. I was not there for DC United. I was there for the Washington Defenders XFL game. Yeah, so was Liam. But you can see these, this is concrete, and it's got some kind of steel bar across. It's concrete again. I would assume this is reinforced concrete. You can see down here, it's been knocked over. It's been knocked over here. It's been knocked over here. You can see the rebar poking out the back. Like there was some, people got aggressive. Like my God.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's hard to knock over reinforced concrete, even if it's 55 years old. So people are getting really, really crushed in there. This is not these crowd control produces or crowding or crushing incidents. There's a lot of forces involved, and that's why they're so dangerous. And you hear these, it doesn't necessarily look that dangerous from the outside, and then you and
then you start pulling bodies out of it.
And then you got 50 psi worth of people pressing on your body and turning you into a sort of
chunky marinara.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, next slide, please. So we got to talk about the sort of the aftermath for football hooliganism. This really sort of inflicted a psychic wound on both sides. And in Liverpool in particular, it created this incredible sense of shame and guilt. The fact is, this could have been any English side. Liverpool was certainly not uniquely violent. It was sort of a combination of the violence that was inherent to all English football at that point, and the choice of venue and the ticketing conspiring. And it was just sort of dumb luck that it was them. But in particular, Liverpool supporters at that time thought of themselves as less violent, as, sort of not engaged in football hooliganism to the extent that other clubs were. And that was something that really had sort of grave repercussions in terms of Liverpool's self-image. And it's something that would ultimately it's a cloud that would hang until Hillsborough at least. But so in any case, Liverpool, along with every other English side, is banned in order to ostensibly address football hooliganism in the English game. Did that work? Of course it didn't. The Thatcher government's best idea to counter football hooliganism of the time was something called goalies against hoolies.
What?
Where
Jesus Christ, this woman was dumb.
and this is a quote, the more articulate goalkeepers
Oh, come on.
would condemn violence because they were the ones like first in line for it because it was easiest to throw shit at them from the stands.
That sounds really dumb for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Thankfully, this never saw the light of day. But football hooliganism in England only really started to decline after Hillsborough, and for like a very complex set of reasons. But the reason why Hillsborough happened, in part, is because Heysel made people terrified of the idea of football fans not being in contained pens. If you don't keep them within these sort of very secure areas, they're just going to rampage out and attack each other. And the same thing is going to happen again. And so that's how you get to the pens at Hillsborough. But one thing I will say is, compared to this, right, the response that Juventus had was very, very strange because for a long time, Juventus officially didn't mention this at all. There was like no official commemoration of this whatsoever. There was this sort of sense of shame, and I'm not quite sure I understand why or how that happened. So while English football did ultimately have this kind of reckoning with hooliganism to an extent, Italian football never really did. As late as 2009, Fabio Capello was talking about Serie A being 100% controlled by the ultras. And so you end up with this sort of like one-sided attempt at reconciliation for a long time, where the next time Liverpool play Juventus, which is in 2005, you can see here it's quite a sort of powerful gesture where Liverpool fans spell out amicizia, which is friendship, and some Juventus fans applaud, and some of them turn their backs on them. Some of them have signs calling English fans animals, saying that Hillsborough is God's punishment.
That seems a bit extreme.
There's one that says it's easy to speak and difficult to pardon, which fucking fair enough, yeah. I guess. Like I'm not going to tell you that you are obligated to forgive a football club, but one thing I will say is that Juventus has never shaken off their ultras completely. And, you know, to this day in Italian top flight matches, you will still see, you know, stabbings in connection with them. And you'll still see violence that I won't say it never happens in England, but it is often more sort of like concealed. So maybe I would suggest a very cynical corporate apology delivered 20 years late is better than nothing. And it's also an indictment on the culture of football at the time. And I have this quote here from Nick Hornby's Fever Pitch. The kids' stuff that proved murderous in Brussels belonged firmly and clearly on a continuum of apparently harmless but obviously threatening acts. Violent chants, wanker signs, the whole petty hard act works, in which a very large minority of fans had been indulging for nearly 20 years. In short, Heysel was part of an organic part of a culture that many of us, myself included, had contributed towards. So,
I will say, you know, there is a huge institutional failing here outside of hooliganism, which is just that they wanted to sell more tickets, so they decided let's have this general section next to the hooligan section.
Ultras,
you know, and this is people were like marching zombie-like to this match, knowing it was a terrible idea the whole time, but like institutional momentum just brought them to the point where like, all right, let's do this stupid thing, and then the stupid thing resulted in the obvious outcome. I don't know that you can. I mean, Obviously, I guess football hooligan culture is bad, but like not being able to handle it in a proactive fashion when you knew how to handle it before, just refusing to do that. It's just incredible that they made that decision in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially having a year after the '84 final, knowing that like some form of violence was going to happen.
Probably want to avoid having these people next to each other. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
So I put this one firmly on the Belgians.
It's on the Belgians. It's on UEFA. It's on Liverpool ? Brackets National Front brackets Ultras brackets. Yeah. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is it has this sort of like it smacks of inevitability, like you say.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
And not inevitability. I would argue the opposite of inevitability. You could have avoided. Yeah, this was very evitable. You could have evaded this, no problem.
Violence, maybe
no
not,
one did
but
that,
but you chose not to. Right.
Both the teams were against the idea. They should have just said, "All right, listen, we're not going to play this match if you have the seating arrangement."
We are, but you get one fan each.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just sacrifice one fan each. You put one in the opposing section. They get beaten to death.
So now, if you go to Juventus Stadium, also Anfield, you can see a very small plaque or like a garden of memory, and the I don't know. It feels inadequate, but what would feel adequate?
For sure. Right. Exactly.
And that's what I had on the Heysel Stadium disaster. What did we learn?
Don't go to Belgium.
Don't go to Belgium. Never listen to UEFA. They're all corrupt and very stupid.
If you see something that's going to result in massive violence and you have the opportunity to prevent it, you should probably do that.
Also,
rather than be like, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea,
right,
this
but
is
we're
a bad idea.
We're going
to do it anyway. Yeah.
For sure. Well, we have a segment on this podcast called Safety Third.
Safety Third.